When David was born, my father was absolutely adamant that his name should be Bart. Why should his name be Bart? Well, partially it's cultural heritage. His father was named Bart, Bartolomeo. His name was Bart. My name was Bart. And for the continuity, for the heritage, he wanted David to be named Bart also. Well, there was a great deal of conflict there because that conflicts with my wife's cultural heritage, where you do not name somebody for somebody who's living. So we had a big go-round. Well, both Phyllis and David were still in the hospital. We had a very large go-around, my dad and I, and eventually wound up calling him David and not Bart.
I think that both my children were treated differently because of it. Things were given to Island like a gold bracelet when she was very young, and my mother-in-law said perhaps we should get stocks for David, and they never did that. I almost regret that I didn't name my son Bart. Perhaps it would have made my father-in-law happier with my child.
In the 1960s, when they had a licensing program in the state of New York, he refused to take the courses that would have allowed him to pass the course, allowed him to pass the exam to become a licensed chiropractor. And there's the downfall, there's the pride, a great deal of pride.
We were down in his office, and in walked a New York City policeman with a summons saying that he was no longer allowed to practice in the state of New York. And he turned to his son Bart and he said, "Don't tell your mother."
When my mother died, it turns out that a whole lot of the people that my father thought were his friends were in fact my mother's friends. And he lost a whole lot of contact. He lost a whole lot of social contact when she died. It was extremely uncomfortable to go visit my father because that balance was not there. The control just came right to the front, you know, whereas she wasn't there to, I guess, temper it. And so it became easier to just not go, just not talk to him.
After Aunt Stella died, he was totally lost. He was totally lost. He didn't know where anything was. I remember I used to go visit him, and did you eat? No, I didn't eat. And we used to go get a couple of slices of pizza or something.
At one point, he was living with us, and he had a mild stroke. And we were trying to get him to go into the ambulance, to go to the hospital. And even, here's a man who has Alzheimer's, and he's had a stroke, and it was real obvious to me, who knew him very well, that he was just not all there. He was able to talk the paramedic out of taking him to the hospital. This is how smart he was. And he bamboozled them something fantastic, using all kinds of strange words, which I knew were nonsense words, but he scared them. They just figured he knew what he was talking about because he was using all these odd words, so they left. And we wound up taking him to the hospital at about 3 o'clock in the morning.
I never wished for him to end his life that way. Not surrounded by any friends, and no friends ever visited him. And it was very, very sad to see this strong-willed, intelligent man go down the tubes at the end of his life.
Later on in years, you start to realize, wow, I've been had. When I was staying with him, he had told me, you know, if you move out of the house, your father will be very proud of you. And I did. And my father hit the fan. And we didn't talk for years because of that. It was because my grandma Marino didn't like the idea that I was smoking in the house and used to give him a hard time about it. And he decided I had to go. So he made up a story. I bought it. And it caused big problems with my family. And that was part of a little bit of a darker side.
Do you resent him for that?
Not at all. He was my uncle. I loved him.
I think there was a moral screw, either loose or lacking, in my father-in-law. He used his sister-in-law for funds that weren't his, and since she was weak and he was strong and she lived there, she would be intimidated and signed for withdrawal slips. And it's really scary, and I'm awed that he has such a wonderful son.
As far as giving was concerned, he was not a giving man at all. He was extremely tight, both in terms of money and in terms of anything, in terms of giving of himself or giving of his time. Very, very tight, unless he thought that there was something to be gained from it. Like, for example, running a large affair. You might say, well, gee, that's great. He's making people happy and stuff. It's not why he did those things. He did those things so that he would be seen as a powerful and important person, so that he would have contacts within the social milieu that he was in. He would be in contact with the powerful people. That was the purpose behind those things. And it's only as an adult, after I became probably in my 30s, that I actually realized what was going on. Well, when I think about the kind of influence that my father had on me, I have to say that the thing that I think of most is I have to consciously, try and consciously not be like him. When you grow up with somebody and he's the biggest thing in your world and the biggest thing in your life, it's natural to emulate. And as I was getting into my teens, I started to notice that I was doing the kinds of things that my father did. And somewhere along the line, I decided I wasn't going to do that. It's sometimes a big struggle because the influence is extremely strong. It's gotten easier as I've gotten older.
Did you love him?
No, I did not love my father. I can't say that. I can't say that into the camera.
I decided to go visit my grandfather's gravesite. It was the first time I've ever been there. And as I was standing there, I remember that he had told me before he died, David, I know things haven't always been good between us, but I want you to know that I love you. I didn't know what he was talking about at the time, but now I wonder if he was trying to apologize for all the bad things he did in his life, or if he was just trying to maintain a good image.